My name is Yoko Kubota. I was born and raised in Japan. Now I live in the US. I was content with my family being in Japan until now. This is where my journey begins. During the accident, Units 1, 2, and 3 released 168 times the amount of cesium-137 radioactive isotopes, which were discharged by Hiroshima bomb into the atmosphere. A vast amount of radiation additionally went into the ocean and continues to the present day. After half a decade, 3 miles from reactors, the radiation level soared over 120 times higher than the global average.
ここは肉を生産するもの。
もう福島のものも安全だってはテレビで言ってるんですけど、もう絶対子供には食べさせられないし、もうそこが気をつけてます、食べ物と外で。
Emissions from Fukushima, the radioisotopes such as iodine and cesium, they traveled worldwide. In fact, we did a study looking at the worldwide impacts and distribution of radionuclides from Fukushima. There's definitely a health impact, especially even locally, like enhanced thyroid in children in the Fukushima prefecture.
娘の方が見つかったりだとか、私自身も甲状腺腺腫という異常が見つかりまして、3ヶ月に一度自主的に検査を受けています。
私としてはもう帰ったらまたがんになると思ってるので帰りたいですけど実際はやっぱり帰れないですね。死んだ方が楽だったんじゃないかなと思いましたね。
The children are suffering. Almost 50% of the youth in Fukushima, about 200,000, have thyroid abnormalities. Around 120 of them are diagnosed for thyroid cancer. Epidemics of leukemia, heart disease, and other immune deficiencies are rapidly rising in all age groups. Two U.S. sailors who served on USS Reagan died after Fukushima radiation exposure. Their mission was to help after the disastrous tsunami. Surprisingly, there is no technology available to fix these reactors. Along with the contaminated water tanks, there are leaks with highly radioactive materials being released into the environment. About 400 tons of radioactive water goes into the ocean every day. We are finding contaminated tuna off the coast of California.
There has been an effort on the part of the nuclear industry to minimize the potential consequences, minimize in the sense of making small estimates. There's also been a tendency on the part of some people to exaggerate the effect on the West Coast, to make people frightened of going to the beaches or of eating fish. And I think that the truth is somewhere in between. And that's because there's not a good understanding of one of the fundamental scientific principles about radiation harm to people. And that is that there is no safe level, there is no threshold of dose below which there is no risk. During the Fukushima accident, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency tried to reassure people in the United States and said, this is a problem in Japan, no dangerous radioactivity can reach the United States, was the quote. But all radiation is dangerous, there's no safe level. And within a few days, the states of Pennsylvania and of Massachusetts began reporting their own measurements of rainwater and showed that rain was showing up with a significant amount of radioactivity in it from Fukushima blown by the winds across the Pacific at levels considerably above the safe drinking water levels that the US EPA itself is required to enforce.
Japan is the size of California and has over 100 active volcanoes. It has hundreds of fault lines and sits on 4 tectonic plates. With about 50 existing reactors, we are heading towards another disaster. There are approximately 100 nuclear power plants in the US and about 435 reactors worldwide. Many of them sit on seismic hazard area.
Each is producing a large amount of plutonium, but also strontium, cesium, tellurium, long-lived radioactive iodines, scores and scores of different fission products. And some of that leaks out as becomes low-level waste and is then sent to these shallow land burial sites. And some of it is the high-level waste for which there's no solutions temporarily stored. So irradiated nuclear fuel, stuff that's inside a reactor and then put into storage, is high-level waste. And we have no place to dispose of that. Not only in this country, but there isn't a high-level waste repository anywhere in the world. And that stuff is dangerous for about 500,000 years. And each reactor produces a ton, 1,000 kilograms, 2,000 pounds of plutonium every 3-4 years. A grapefruit size lump of plutonium, and I could theoretically divide it up and put 1/300 millionth of it in everyone's lungs in the United States. There's enough toxicity in that one grapefruit size of plutonium to cause a cancer in every person in the country.
Global warming is the rise of temperature above and beyond that of the natural greenhouse effect due to human emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbons, black carbon, which is a particle component different from greenhouse gases that absorbs sunlight and therefore appears black in the atmosphere. Nuclear power causes emissions because normally, even without a meltdown, because you have to mine and refine uranium during the lifetime of the nuclear power plant, and that's a very energy-intensive process. It's not a completely clean energy source. Since pre-industrial times, since the mid-1700s, humans have emitted huge amounts of carbon dioxide and other pollutants and have caused the temperature to rise on average of about almost 0.9 degrees Celsius or 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Sea levels have risen slightly, tends to a couple hundred millimeters worldwide, but they have potential to rise meters and tens of meters, up to 70 meters, and ultimately if the East Antarctic ice sheet melts. You get shifts in agriculture, so some crops like citrus crops that require a certain number of degree cooling days per year can't be grown in certain regions, so that it causes economic loss and shifting of agriculture. You get more severe storminess, and hurricanes become more intense, not only increasing the storm surge, but they also, because of the warmer sea surface temperatures, they drive hurricanes, so they make the hurricanes more intense. You get some droughts in some regions, but heavier rainfall in others.
The nuclear power industry is not regulated properly. It is managed by each country, even though one accident will damage the environment and people worldwide. Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant is located less than 40 miles north of New York City. 25 million people live within a 50-mile evacuation zone. There is no homeowner's insurance that covers radiation contamination. It sits on less than a mile from seismic zone. Taishan Nuclear Power Plant located in Taishan, China. The latest safety test that should have been received before installation did not occur. The completion date is scheduled to be early 2016. Sellafield Nuclear Site in Cumbria, England. They are holding hundreds of tons of highly radioactive materials and have for more than 60 years. The old construction is cracking, leaking, and has a high risk of exploding. cleanup is scheduled to be done by 2120. This is just the tip of the iceberg, including Fukushima. The only worldwide nuclear regulator is IAEA. It regulates some rules, but member states are not required to comply by them. They also promote the nuclear power industry. I wonder what will happen to the future of Japan. I wonder what will happen to the world.
A lot of people are not aware of the possibilities of changing, and most people have been skeptical that renewable energy could be good enough to actually replace what we currently have. The other limitation is that there are a lot of lobbyists and people who support the current energy infrastructure because they make money off of it.
Well, the fact that some governments have gotten the message tells us that we can, if we are active enough, get other governments to do the same. So, in the United States, the power of these large corporations to get the decision makers to do what they want, give huge subsidies to nuclear power, can be countered by large numbers of people pressing their legislators to not do that.
The economics are very favorable in terms of wind and solar power in particular. The technologies are here for electric transportation, for electric heating and cooling. And so there's no reason we can't change. It would only benefit society. There's very little downside. It really becomes a question of does the population or do the populations of countries want to do this? Because it's not a technical or economic limitation to doing this. It's totally social and political. So if people want to do this, then they will. And so it really becomes a question of whether there's a collective will in the population to do this. Let's say in 2050, if we are only 10% different from where we are today, or 20%, or even 30 or 40%, then we will have a problem in terms of climate.
Tens of thousands of generations can be affected by the leaking high-level waste produced by our society. They don't get to vote. They can't go and organize. They're not born yet. They're the ones who are going to do the dying from our mistakes, but they can't do anything to undo our mistakes. So it's not just that we have to protect ourselves, our children. There are 500,000 years of life ahead that can be damaged by the horrible errors that our institutions have been making. So all good things that have happened in the last 100, 200 years have occurred because citizens have risen up, been the countervailing force against vested interests. And that can happen on this.
Can the global community come together in protecting humanity from this critical issue? We cannot change what has happened, but we can change the future. We owe it to our children and generations to come.